Don't talk to my mother like that. Lily Parker blinked. I didn't do anything to your mother, he said after a moment, irritation creeping into his voice. Look at her. His gaze shifted past Lily and settled again on Sophia Parker. Frankly, he added with cool disdain, she looks absolutely shabby. Alexander Voss seemed not to notice. He examined Sophia. His eyes traveled slowly over her stall, the faded green awning above it, and finally her clothes. Her boots were worn and dusted with Georgia dirt. Her jeans were faded at the knees. Her sleeves were rolled up from long hours of work, revealing strong arms marked with small scratches. A pair of old gloves hung from her back pocket. Alexander let out a quiet breath of dismissal. A place like this, he said, gesturing toward the market around him, stays exactly the way it is because people get comfortable looking like they've given up. His voice sharpened slightly. You show up dressed like that, selling vegetables from a wooden table in a dusty parking lot and then expect people to treat you with respect. He shook his head faintly. Honestly, eating and working like this and then wondering why the world doesn't admire it, that's part of the problem. He looked Sophia up and down again. People who dress that way shouldn't be surprised when the world doesn't take them seriously. Before anyone else could respond, Lily stepped forward. She stared straight into Alexander Voss's face. You can have all the money in the world, Lily said firmly, her voice steady despite her racing breath. But you don't have the right to insult my mother. Behind her, Sophia felt the entire market holding its breath. Alexander studied her again. You shouldn't shout at adults, he said. Lily didn't move. You shouldn't insult people who are working, she replied. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Alexander's mouth, though it wasn't friendly. You're very bold for a little girl, and you're very rude for a grown man. Alexander shifted his attention briefly towards Sophia again, as if Lily were merely an interruption. Well, he said with a small shrug, someone needed to say it. Lily's hands tightened. My mom works harder than anyone here, she said fiercely. She wakes up before the sun. She carries all those crates herself. She feeds people with the food she sells. And you walk in here wearing a suit and act like she's something to laugh at. Alexander opened his mouth to answer, but something about the way the child stood there so small, yet completely unafraid caused the words to hesitate. Only minutes earlier, the morning at Willow Creek Community Market had been perfectly ordinary. Before sunrise, vendors rolled in with pickup trucks and vans filled with produce. Wooden tables scraped against the pavement as stalls were set up. Crates of tomatoes, peaches, onions, and peppers appeared one after another. The air filled with the smell of fresh earth, cut greens, coffee, and warm fruit. Neighbors greeted each other across the aisles. Morning, Miss Sophia. How your sister doing these days? You get those tomatoes from Mom this week. Sophia Parker had arrived before dawn like she did every Saturday. She arranged her vegetables carefully. Tomatoes stacked where the sunlight would catch their red shine. Okra placed in shallow baskets. Beside the scale, collard greens spread across the back of the table like dark green fans. And beside the stall sat Lily. Her small wooden stool was positioned so she could see both the vegetables and the customers. The metal change box rested in her lap like something important because to Lily it was. She took her job seriously. She knew the price of every vegetable. She counted change faster than many adults. She kept the quarters separated from the dimes and the nickels arranged. neatly in rows. Earlier that morning, old Reverend Ellis had approached the stall, leaning on his cane. "Morning, Miss Sophia." "Morning, Reverend. What can I get you today?" "Sweet potatoes," he said, "and maybe forgiveness." Lily didn't even look up from the change box. "Sweet potatoes are here," she said calmly. "Forgiveness is 2 stalls over." The Reverend laughed so hard he had to hold the table. That was how mornings usually went at Willow Creek Community Market. Work conversation, small kindnesses. But for the past week, another topic had moved quietly through the aisles. Voss development. Everyone had heard the rumors. A redevelopment project, luxury shops, restaurants, and glass storefronts, and the simple truth beneath those polished words. If the land was sold, the market would disappear. Sophia tried not to think about it. Lily noticed anyway. Then the black SUVs arrived. 3 of them rolled slowly into the lot. Doors opened. Men in pressed shirts stepped out. And finally, Alexander Voss emerged from the last vehicle. "That's him," someone whispered from the flower stand. Voss walked down the aisle with 2 assistants, discussing zoning and development plans. When he reached Sophia's stall, he stopped. Now Lily stood directly in front of him. Her small chest rose and fell quickly, but she didn't step back. Alexander Voss looked down at her once more, and for the first time since stepping into the market that morning, the billionaire realized something unexpected. The smallest person in the market was the only one who wasn't afraid of him. For several long seconds after Lily finished speaking, the entire Willow Creek Community Market stood frozen. Alexander Voss stood perfectly still. A young girl stood directly in front of him, small fists clenched, her eyes fixed on his face with a kind of certainty he rarely saw in adults. "You can have all the money in the world," Lily had said. "But you don't have the right to insult my mother." If this moment touched your heart, please like the video and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your support means a lot, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story like this. Behind her, Sophia Parker felt the entire market holding its breath. Alexander studied the girl carefully. Alexander crossed his arms slowly. "You speak very confidently," he said. "I speak the truth." There was no hesitation in her voice. Behind the stall, Sophia placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Lily," she said softly. "That's enough." But Lily shook her head. "No, Mom." Her eyes stayed on Alexander Voss. "He needs to hear this." The words caused another ripple of quiet surprise across the market. Alexander tilted his head slightly. "Do I?" Lily nodded. "Yes, sir." Something about the way she said, "sir," respectful but unwavering, caught the attention of several of the older vendors. Alexander waited. "Go on then," he said. Lily drew in a breath. "My mom wakes up before the sun comes up," she said. She pointed toward the stacked crates beside the stall. "She carries those boxes herself. Those things are heavy. I tried lifting one once and I couldn't even move it." A small laugh escaped someone near the honey stand and was quickly covered by a cough. Lily continued, "She works all morning so people here can cook dinner for their families." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And when the market closes," Lily added, "she still has to clean everything, pack the truck, drive home, cook dinner, and make sure I finish my homework." Alexander listened without interrupting. Lily took a small step closer. "You walked in here, looked at her clothes, and decided she didn't deserve respect. Her gaze didn't waver. That's wrong. Alexander Voss held her stare for a long moment. Then he glanced around the market. He noticed things he had barely registered earlier. The worn wooden stalls, the patched awnings, the cracked pavement where weeds had pushed through over the years. But standing there now, he noticed something else, too. The way Lily stood squarely in front of her mother like a small shield. Alexander looked back at the girl. "You seem very certain your mother deserves respect," he said. Lily answered without hesitation. "She does, even though she runs a vegetable stall in a place that's clearly struggling." "Yes." Alexander studied her again. "And you believe that kind of work deserves admiration?" "Yes." The answer came faster this time. Lily gestured toward the vegetables laid out on the table. "People come here because they trust her," she said. "They know the food is fresh. They know the price is fair. They know she works hard." Miss Evelyn from the preserves table lifted her chin slightly. Old Reverend Ellis nodded once from where he stood with his cane. Mr. Whitaker at the honey stand folded his arms thoughtfully. Lily noticed them. She swept a small hand toward the surrounding stalls. "All these people know her." She looked back at Alexander Voss. "Respect doesn't come from wearing an expensive suit." Alexander said nothing for a moment. Behind him, one of his assistants shifted nervously. "Mr. Voss," the man murmured quietly. "We still need to inspect the west section of the property." Alexander raised a hand without turning. The assistant fell silent immediately. Alexander's attention remained on Lily. "You handle the money here?" he asked. Lily nodded. "I do the change. And you're good at it?" "Yes." Alexander looked down briefly at the coins scattered across the ground. Lily followed his gaze, then crouched and began picking them up one by one. Her movements were calm and deliberate, as though nothing unusual had just happened. She dropped the last quarter into the metal box and snapped the lid shut. The small click echoed louder than expected. Alexander watched her for a moment longer. Then he turned his head slightly and looked at Sophia. Their eyes met for the first time since Lily had stepped forward. Sophia's expression was steady. Alexander nodded once almost imperceptibly. Then he turned away. "Let's continue," he said to his team. The group began walking down the market aisle again, clipboards and polished shoes moving through the dusty pavement. Gradually, the noise of the market returned. Miss Evelyn leaned toward Sophia from the next stall. "That girl of yours," she whispered. Sophia exhaled slowly. "Yes," she said quietly. Lily climbed back onto her stool and set the change box carefully in her lap. For a moment, she stared toward the far end of the market where Alexander Voss had disappeared between the stalls. "Mom," she said. "Yes, baby." Lily tilted her head slightly. "Do you think he understood?" Sophia followed her daughter's gaze. The billionaire and his team were already halfway across the lot, discussing something over a clipboard. "I don't know," Sophia said honestly. Lily tapped the lid of the change box thoughtfully. "Well," she said, "I hope he did, because something in Lily Parker told her that the conversation between their family and Alexander Voss was not finished yet." That evening, Alexander Voss stood at the windows of his office and looked down at Atlanta without really seeing it. From the 42nd floor, the city always looked clean, controlled. The roads glowed with orderly streams of light. Glass towers reflected the last gold of the evening sun. Even the older neighborhoods, from this height, looked flattened into neat patches of shadow and geometry. Distance had a way of making everything appear manageable. Alexander had built a life on that illusion. Behind him, the office was silent except for the low hum of climate control and the soft click of a folder being placed on his desk. Ryan Ellis stood waiting. Alexander did not turn right away. He kept one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly against the window frame, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. For most of the day, every time he had closed his eyes, he had seen the same thing. A small girl standing in the middle of a market aisle. Coins on the pavement. That voice. Respect doesn't come from wearing an expensive suit. Sir, Ryan said carefully. You asked for background on Sophia Parker. Alexander turned then and crossed the office in a few quiet steps. Ryan had laid out a slim file, no thicker than a church bulletin. That somehow irritated him. Whole lives reduced to thin folders. Always did. Though he rarely admitted it, he sat, opened the file, and began to read. Sophia Parker, 34, single mother, resident of a modest apartment on the west side. Temporary lease, no significant assets, one child, no spouse listed, no criminal record, no lawsuits, no family wealth. Vendor at Willow Creek Community Market for 5 years. Known by other vendors as reliable, pays late once in a while, but always pays. There was a small stapled note near the back. Borrowed vehicle for produce pickup. Works 6 days a week. Leaves market after close. Picks up child from aftercare on weekdays. No known support system beyond neighborhood and market community. Alexander read that page twice. Who put this together? He asked. Ryan adjusted his glasses slightly. Our standard research team. Alexander's eyes stayed on the file. Standard. Yes, sir. Standard meaning efficient, cold, stripped of anything not immediately useful to business. Enough information to evaluate risk. Not enough to recognize humanity unless someone insisted on looking for it. He set the file down. And the market? He asked. Ryan opened another folder. This one was thicker. Willow Creek Community Market occupies the most valuable portion of the block, he said. If acquired in full, the site would allow for continuous frontage along both primary streets. Retail projections remain extremely strong. Alexander nodded once, but Ryan did not miss the fact that his gaze had already drifted back to the first file. There's resistance from the vendors, Ryan added. Mostly informal for now. Anxiety, rumors, some talk of petitions. Yes, sir. Alexander leaned back in his chair. He thought of the market in the morning light, of old wooden stacked produce, of people looking at one another as if they belonged to something more binding than contract law. It had not impressed him when he first stepped into it. He had seen age, disorder, low yield. But then that child had spoken and somehow the whole place had shifted under his feet. Not literally, of course, but enough. You're distracted, Ryan said. It was not an accusation. Ryan had worked for him long enough to know when blunt honesty would be tolerated and when it would not. Tonight, apparently it would. Alexander let out a short breath. Am I? Yes. Alexander looked at him. Ryan hesitated only briefly. Sir. With respect. Most people shout when they're afraid. That girl didn't. Alexander's expression did not change. No, he said quietly. She didn't. Ryan closed the second folder. She believed what she was saying. Alexander looked again at Sophia's file. She shouldn't have spoken to me that way. Ryan said nothing. Alexander tapped one finger against the edge of the desk. And yet, Ryan echoed carefully. For a moment the room went quiet again. Then Alexander asked, "Did you find anything unusual about Sophia Parker?" "No, sir. Other than the obvious, which is she works harder than most people with 10 times her resources." Alexander did not answer. He returned his gaze to the window. Across town in a second-floor apartment above a laundromat in a closed tax office, Sophia Parker was standing at her kitchen sink rinsing collard greens for dinner. The apartment was small but clean. Lily's school papers were clipped to the refrigerator with mismatched magnets. One kitchen chair had a loose leg Sophia kept meaning to fix. The linoleum near the stove had begun peeling at one corner. A pot of beans simmered low. Cornbread cooled beneath a dish towel. Through the open window came the layered sound of evening traffic, somebody laughing on the sidewalk, and a dog barking 2 buildings over. Lily sat at the table with her homework spread in front of her and the metal change box beside her like a trusted companion. Sophia glanced over her shoulder. "Why is that box in my kitchen?" Lily looked up. "I'm checking it." "You checked it 3 times already." "I'm checking it emotionally now." Sophia had to press her lips together to keep from smiling. "Emotionally?" she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." Sophia turned back to the sink, though the smile still touched one corner of her mouth. It did not stay there long. The day had exhausted her in ways labor usually did not. Physical work she understood. You lifted, carried, bent, sorted, sweated, kept moving. The body complained, and then eventually forgave you. Humiliation was different. Humiliation stayed. It sat somewhere just under the ribs and replayed itself in pieces. A glance, a tone, a sentence you wished you had answered differently. Sophia had lived long enough to know that what hurt most was not being seen as poor. Poverty in one form or another had followed her for years. What hurt was the contempt, the assumption that hard work and worn clothes meant a smaller kind of life. At the table, Lily pushed her worksheet aside. "Mom." "Yes, baby. Are we going to lose the market?" Sophia dried her hands slowly before turning around. Children deserved honesty, but they also deserved sleep. Mothers spent half their lives choosing between the two. "I don't know," Sophia said finally. "Not yet." Lily studied her face. "That man wants it," she said. Sophia pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Yes. He thinks because he has money he can do whatever he wants." Sophia folded her hands. "A lot of people think money means they don't have to listen." Lily frowned. "That's stupid." Sophia laughed softly then, tired but real. "Well, you're not wrong." Lily touched the lid of the change box with one fingertip. "I didn't mean to yell that loud." "Yes, you did." A pause. Then Lily gave a tiny, reluctant smile. "Okay, I did." Sophia reached across the table and smoothed a loose braid away from Lily's cheek. "You cannot talk to every rude person in this world like that," she said gently. "Why not?" "Because sometimes rude people had power. Because sometimes power turned mean. Because mothers lay awake nights trying to imagine how to keep a child both good and safe." Instead, Sophia said, "Because not everybody deserves that much of your energy." Lily considered this deeply, the way she considered most things, "But you deserved somebody saying something." The words landed softly, harder somehow for being soft. Sophia looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she said, "Come set the table." Lily slid down from her chair and carried 2 plates over with great seriousness. "Mom, yes. If he comes back, I'm still watching him." Sophia set the cornbread on the table. "I know you are." Lily nodded once, satisfied with being understood. Back downtown, Alexander Voss closed Sophia's file at last, but not before his eyes caught one final line handwritten in the margin by someone from the research team. "Child often present at stall. Handles cash. Bright. Alert." Alexander stared at the words, longer than he should have. Then he stood, took the file with him, and walked once more to the window. Below him the city glittered with all the confidence of money. But somewhere beyond the shine and height and steel, in a neighborhood his investors would call transitional and his planners would call underutilized, a woman was likely serving dinner after a 12-hour workday, and a little girl with sharp eyes was probably still deciding whether he had understood what she said. For the first time in a long while, Alexander Voss found himself unsettled, not by opposition, but by the possibility that a child might be right. The next morning Willow Creek Community Market woke the same way it always did. Before the sun fully cleared the rooftops, trucks were already pulling into the cracked parking lot. Vendors dragged wooden tables into place, the legs scraping across pavement worn smooth by decades of Saturdays. Crates thumped onto the ground. The smell of tomatoes, onions, coffee, and damp earth slowly filled the morning air, but something in the atmosphere had changed. People spoke a little quieter. Heads turned more often toward Sophia Parker's stall. Word traveled quickly in places like this, and by the time the first customers arrived everyone already knew what had happened the day before. The story had grown in the telling. Some said Lily had shouted down a billionaire. Some said the man had turned red and stormed off. Others claimed he'd looked like someone had slapped him with a truth he wasn't ready for. Miss Evelyn was retelling the moment for the 3rd time near the preserves table. "I'm telling you," she said, tapping the lid of a jar for emphasis. That child stood there like a tiny preacher. Old Reverend Ellis chuckled beside her. "Well," he said, "sometimes the Lord sends the message in a smaller package." Across the aisle, Sophia unloaded a crate of sweet potatoes from the back of her van. She worked quickly, the way she always did, but she could feel the attention drifting toward her stall like sunlight creeping across a floor. Lily noticed it too. She sat on her stool with the metal change box in her lap, watching the market with sharp eyes. "Mom," she said quietly. "Yes, baby. Everybody's staring." Sophia slid the crate into place beneath the table. "That's because people like a story," she said calmly. Lily tilted her head. "I didn't do it for a story." "I know." Sophia wiped her hands on a small towel and began arranging tomatoes in careful rows. "But once something happens in a place like this," she added, "people talk about it for a while." Lily considered that. Then she opened the change box and began organizing the coins. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "they better make sure they tell it right." By mid-morning the market had returned to its usual rhythm. Customers moved through the aisles. Conversations floated between stalls. Children tugged their parents toward baskets of peaches. The radio near the honey stand played an old gospel song, and slowly the attention around Sophia's stall faded, which was exactly how Sophia preferred it. She handed a bag of collard greens to a customer and accepted a $10 bill. "Lily, 650 back, Lily said, already counting. Coins clicked neatly into the woman's palm. You're fast, the customer said with a smile. Lily nodded. I practice. Sophia shook her head slightly. Then a shadow passed across the stall. The conversation around them softened again, not as suddenly as the day before but enough for Lily to look up. Two black SUVs had just pulled into the lot. They stopped near the edge of the market. Doors opened. Men in pressed shirts stepped out. And then Alexander Voss stepped from the second vehicle. Miss Evelyn saw him first. Well, now, she murmured under her breath. Across the aisle Reverend Ellis leaned on his cane and watched carefully. The billionaire began walking through the market again, though something about the scene was different this time. Yesterday he had walked like a man inspecting property. Today his pace was slower, more deliberate. His assistants followed a step behind, carrying folders and tablets, but Alexander himself said nothing. He simply observed. He passed the honey stand. Mr. Whitaker gave a short nod but did not speak. He passed the preserves table. Miss Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. And then he reached Sophia's stall. For a moment neither Sophia nor Lily spoke. Alexander looked at the vegetables laid out on the table. The tomatoes were bright in the sunlight. The collards were fresh. The okra sat neatly arranged in shallow baskets. Then he looked at Lily. She was already watching him. The change box rested in her lap again, her small hands folded calmly over the lid. Well, Lily said. The word hung in the air. Alexander raised one eyebrow. Well, she repeated, did you think about it? A faint ripple of amusement moved through a few nearby vendors. Alexander glanced briefly at Sophia. She remained still behind the table, her expression neutral but attentive. Then he looked back at Lily. Yes, he said, I did. Lily studied his face carefully as if she were measuring the truth of the answer. And, she asked. Alexander placed his hands in his coat pockets. You made a strong argument yesterday. That's not what I asked. A quiet laugh escaped Reverend Ellis somewhere behind the crowd. Alexander's mouth twitched slightly. You asked if I thought about it, he said. I did. Lily leaned back on her stool. That's only step one, she said. Alexander blinked. Step one, yes. She held up one finger, thinking. Then she raised a second. Step two is fixing it. A couple of vendors exchanged glances. Alexander looked at the girl with something approaching curiosity. And what exactly do you think needs fixing? Lily pointed toward the vegetables. You judged my mom without knowing anything about her. She pointed toward the surrounding stalls. You judged this whole market without knowing the people here. Her voice remained calm. That's bad math. Alexander tilted his head slightly. Bad math. Yes. Lily tapped the change box. When I count money I have to see every coin before I decide the total. Alexander watched her for a moment. And you believe I didn't see everything? You didn't even look. The words were spoken simply without accusation. That somehow made them land harder. Alexander glanced around the market again. The vendors weren't pretending not to watch anymore. They were watching openly now, waiting. For a long moment Alexander Voss said nothing. Then he reached toward the stall and picked up one of the tomatoes. He turned it slowly in his hand, examining it. Perfect color. Firm, fresh. How much? He asked. Lily answered immediately. $2. Alexander pulled a bill from his wallet and placed it on the table. Lily opened the change box. No change needed, he said. Lily closed the box again. Okay. Alexander looked at the tomato one last time. Then he said quietly, almost to himself, maybe I didn't look closely enough yesterday. Lily nodded once. That's what I said. Alexander set the tomato back on the table, but he didn't leave. Instead he remained standing there as if the conversation wasn't finished yet, and Lily had the distinct feeling that it wasn't. Alexander Voss did not leave. That was the first thing everyone noticed. Men like him were supposed to move through places like Willow Creek Community Market the way Weather moved through, briefly, decisively, without becoming part of anything. They arrived, evaluated, and went on to rooms where decisions were made over polished tables and filtered water. They did not stop at a produce stall after being corrected by a child and stand there as if the conversation still belonged to them. But Alexander stayed. The tomato he had almost bought sat where he had set it down, red and unbothered in the morning light. Lily kept both hands on her change box and watched him the way a school principal might watch a student who had already lied once and was being given exactly one chance to do better. Sophia did not speak first. She had long ago learned that silence properly used could force a person to reveal what they had really come for. Alexander glanced from Lily to Sophia, then to the vegetables arranged across the table. "These are yours?" he asked. Sophia folded a paper sack for a customer and nodded. "They are. You source them locally, some from a distributor south of the city, some from a farm outside town when the price isn't too high." Alexander absorbed that, and this stall supports both of you. It was not phrased as a question, but Sophia answered anyway. "It does." A woman waiting to buy onions shifted her purse higher on her shoulder but made no attempt to leave. Two men near the honey stand stopped pretending they were interested in bees. Alexander slipped one hand into his coat pocket. "How long have you been here?" 5 years. "And before that?" Sophia handed the woman her onions, named the price, waited while Lily counted back change, and only then looked at him. "Before that," she said evenly, "I was working somewhere else." Alexander's face revealed nothing, but Lily noticed the question still sitting behind his eyes. "My mom's not applying for a job," Lily said. A few people nearby smiled into their collars. Alexander looked down at her. "No," he said, "I suppose she isn't." Lily lifted her chin. "Supposing correctly is better than talking wrong." This time the laugh that moved through the nearest stalls was impossible to hide. Even Sophia had to turn slightly, pressing her lips together for a moment before facing forward again. Alexander's expression altered by the smallest degree. Not a smile, not quite, but something in him had adjusted. Before he could answer, old Reverend Ellis appeared at the edge of the stall with his cane and his usual timing. "Morning again," the Reverend said, looking from Sophia to Alexander to Lily and then back to the Collards. "I seem to recall I came here for sweet potatoes, but I may stay for the character development." "Reverend," Sophia said, a warning threaded lightly through the word. "What?" he asked, offended only in the theatrical sense. "I'm old. I've earned the right to observe." Lily nodded solemnly. "That's true." Alexander turned toward the older man. "You've been here long." Reverend Ellis adjusted his hat. "Long enough to remember when this lot was mostly gravel and 2 folding tables." He tapped his cane once on the pavement. "Long enough to remember who sold out, who hung on, who buried spouses, who raised children from behind these stalls. His gaze sharpened, long enough to know there's more here than square footage. The words did not sound rehearsed. That was probably why they landed. Alexander said nothing. Miss Evelyn, who never missed an opening once she believed she had moral permission, called from her preserves table. This market kept half this neighborhood fed in '08 when folks were losing homes and pretending they weren't. She straightened a row of jars. Ain't no shopping center ever done that. Mr. Whitaker from the honey stand joined in without looking up from his labels. My wife sold candles here after my pension got cut. He shrugged. The movement, careful with age, helped us keep the lights on 2 winters. The woman who had just bought onions tucked the bag under her arm and added, Miss Sophia brought vegetables up to my sister when she had surgery and couldn't drive. Sophia immediately shook her head. That was nothing. No, the woman said, it wasn't. Alexander stood in the middle of it, hearing not a protest but a testimony. There was no chanting, no signs, no public relations strategy behind it. Just ordinary people stating plain facts in ordinary voices, which somehow made the defense of the place feel more serious than outrage would have. Lily watched his face. You see, she said quietly. Alexander met her eyes. I'm listening. Lily considered him a moment, then nodded once as if marking a small point in his favor. A pickup rattled past the outer fence. Somewhere down the row a toddler began crying over a dropped cookie. The market, sensing it had made its point for now, slowly resumed its movement, but the energy around Sophia's stall stayed taut. Alexander looked across the aisle at the line of old tables, the patched canopies, the handwritten signs listing prices in thick black marker. He saw what he had always seen before: age, inefficiency, low-margin trade. But now those things were layered beneath other facts he could not as easily dismiss. Longevity, memory, interdependence, people whose lives were stitched into the place in small, invisible threads. Ryan Ellis approached from a respectful distance, holding a tablet against his chest. He read the scene in one glance and chose his tone accordingly. Mr. Voss, he said softly. The zoning consultant is waiting by the south fence. Alexander did not turn. He can wait. Ryan nodded once. Lily noticed that too. Alexander looked at Sophia again. You've heard about the redevelopment. Yes. And you know why investors want this block. Yes. Then you understand this market sits on valuable property. Sophia's face did not change. Property is valuable because people give their lives to it. It was the kind of sentence a person could only say if she had earned every word of it. Alexander's eyes held hers a second longer than before. Lily felt the current in that silence, though she did not yet have the language for it. Then Alexander said, "There are plans to modernize the area." Miss Evelyn snorted from across the aisle. That's a pretty word for pushing old folks out. Ryan glanced toward Alexander, waiting to see whether he would object. He did not. Lily swung one foot once beneath her stool. When grown-ups say modernize, she said, it usually means somebody else is about to have a bad day. Several heads turned toward her. Alexander looked down. You have opinions about a great many things. Yes, Lily said. That saves time. He almost smiled again. Almost. Sophia reached for a basket of okra and began restacking it. With respect, Mr. Voss, whatever happens on paper doesn't happen on paper for us. It happens in rent, In food, in whether my daughter has a place to sit while I work. Alexander's gaze shifted to Lily's stool, then to the change box in her lap. The box was old but polished by use along the edges. Her thumb rested possessively over the latch. "She always comes with you?" he asked. "Most Saturdays," Sophia said. "I help," Lily added. "I can see that." It was not said unkindly. That more than anything made Lily narrow her eyes. She had already decided kindness from him should be verified, not assumed. A voice rose from farther down the aisle, "Mr. Jenkins from the bread table calling out prices on fresh rolls." The smell of coffee drifted through again. The market pressed on, as markets do. Even while lives stood at the edge of being altered, Alexander turned slowly, taking in the people around him one more time. Old Reverend Ellis with his cane. Miss Evelyn with her preserves and sharp mouth. Mr. Whitaker with his honey and his pension stories. The woman with the onions. Sophia behind her vegetables. Lily guarding a metal box like the whole moral order of the world might be stored inside it. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed just slightly, less declarative, more careful. "This project," he said, "is bigger than one stall." Reverend Ellis answered before Sophia could. "Every injustice says that." Ryan looked down at his tablet. The sentence settled over the space between them. Lily leaned forward. "Then maybe," she said, "big things should learn how not to crush small ones." No one laughed that time. Alexander held her gaze, and something in his face became unreadable even to himself. Then he gave one short nod. Not agreement, not yet, but acknowledgement, and stepped back from the stall. "I'll be in touch," he said. "With who?" Lily asked immediately. Alexander looked at Sophia. "Your mother." Lily considered that, then said, "You should also talk to people who don't have office chairs." Ryan looked down very quickly as if hiding a reaction. Alexander did not answer. He turned and walked away down the aisle, Ryan falling in beside him. The other men hurrying to catch up. This time, as he passed the neighboring stalls, people did not look away. And this time he noticed. Lily watched until the black SUVs pulled out of the lot and disappeared beyond the fence. Then she looked up at Sophia. "He's still thinking in rich people sentences." Sophia let out a breath that was very nearly a laugh. "Maybe." Lily tapped the lid of her change box. "He better think faster." Miss Evelyn called over. "Baby, you keep talking like that and he's going to need a whole second childhood." Reverend Ellis nodded. "And possibly Sunday school." The market laughed then, the sound easing some of the pressure that had been sitting on everyone's chest since yesterday. Sophia shook her head, but this time she let herself smile. As she turned back to her vegetables, her eyes drifted toward the lot where Alexander's vehicles had been. The smile faded because now the danger felt clearer, not smaller. The market had spoken. Lily had spoken. And men with power did not always like being told the truth in public. At the far end of the city, in the backseat of a black SUV, Alexander Voss sat in silence. While Ryan reviewed figures he was not hearing, he could still see the stall. Still hear the old man saying there was more there than square footage. Still hear the child saying, "Big things should learn how not to crush small ones." For the first time in years, a piece of land no longer looked simple to him. By Monday morning the story had spread far beyond Willow Creek Community Market. Stories had a way of traveling faster than truth. But in this case the truth was already dramatic enough. By the time the week began, people across the neighborhood were repeating the moment in their own versions. A little girl had stood up to a billionaire. Some said she shouted him down. Others said she embarrassed him. A few said she had reminded him how to behave like a human being. At the small barber shop 2 blocks from the market, the television above the mirror was playing a local news segment. The reporter stood in front of the familiar wooden stalls. Residents are raising concerns about a proposed redevelopment project that could replace the long-standing Willow Creek Community Market with a commercial complex. Behind the reporter, the camera caught glimpses of vendors setting up tables, customers browsing produce, and the old green awning over Sophia Parker's stall. In a nearby diner, 2 construction workers watched the segment while eating eggs. "That the place?" one asked. "Yeah," the other said. "My aunt buys vegetables there every week, and that kid really yelled at the rich guy." Apparently, the man shook his head slowly. "Good for her." Across town, inside the glass tower of Voss Development, Alexander Voss watched the same segment in silence. The television hung on the wall of the executive conference room. Around the long table sat 6 investors. Their suits were immaculate. Their expressions were not. A woman with silver hair and sharp eyes leaned forward slightly. "This is becoming a problem," she said. Alexander remained seated at the head of the table, hands folded calmly. "It's a local story," he replied. "For now." Another investor said. He tapped a tablet screen. "The clip already has 200,000 views online." Alexander's assistant Ryan stood quietly near the wall, observing the room. The silver-haired woman spoke again. "Our timeline for the redevelopment cannot afford public resistance." Alexander said nothing. Another investor sighed. "Alexander, this market is sentimental for people. You know how these things go. If protests start, the city council slows down permits. Zoning hearings drag out for months and suddenly a 2-year project becomes 5. Alexander leaned back slightly in his chair. "We haven't submitted final plans yet." "That's exactly why we should move faster," the man insisted. The room waited. Alexander's gaze drifted briefly toward the television again. On the screen the camera showed Sophia handing a bag of collard greens to a customer while Lily sat beside the stall counting coins in her metal box. The reporter's voice continued, "Many community members say the market represents more than just a place to buy food. For some residents it represents history." Alexander picked up the remote and muted the television. The silence that followed felt heavier than the report itself. "Alexander," the silver-haired investor said, her tone firm. "This project is worth $30 million in projected revenue." He nodded once. "I'm aware. We didn't buy half the block to preserve a vegetable market." Ryan watched Alexander carefully. After several seconds Alexander spoke. "Public opinion matters." The room went still. "It matters when it threatens profit," the man across the table replied. Alexander didn't answer immediately. Instead he stood and walked toward the window. 40 floors below, Atlanta moved with its usual restless energy. Traffic flowed through intersections. Pedestrians crossed streets with coffee cups in their hands. The city never paused long enough for any single argument to matter very much, except sometimes it did. Behind him one of the investors spoke again. "The girl is becoming part of the story." Alexander turned slightly. "How so?" The investor held up a tablet. "Social media." He turned the screen toward the room. A photo filled the display. Lily sitting on her stool beside the vegetable stall, the metal change box in her lap, staring directly at the camera with the same fearless expression she had given Alexander 2 days earlier. The caption read, "The bravest voice in Atlanta." Alexander studied the image for a moment. Then he looked away. "This is temporary attention," he said. The silver-haired woman folded her arms. "Attention is exactly what we don't need." Alexander returned to the table. "We continue as planned," he said. The investors exchanged glances. "Then we move forward with acquisition." Alexander paused only for a second. "Yes." Across town, Sophia Parker was unloading crates from the back of her van again. Monday mornings were quieter than Saturdays. But the small weekday version of the market still opened for regular customers who preferred fresh vegetables over supermarket aisles. Lily sat on her stool with the change box open, carefully stacking coins. A man approached the stall holding his phone. "Miss Sophia," he said with a grin. "You seen this?" He turned the screen toward her. The same photo from the news story filled the display. Lily blinked. "That's me." "Yes, it is," the man said. "You're famous now." Lily frowned. "I didn't want to be famous." Sophia wiped her hands on her apron and looked closer at the phone. The caption made her stomach tighten. "The bravest voice in Atlanta." Lily leaned forward to study the image. "They took that without asking." "That's what cameras do sometimes," Sophia said quietly. Another customer approached. "I saw you on TV this morning," the woman said to Lily. Lily sighed. "I just wanted him to stop being rude." The woman smiled warmly. "Well, sometimes that's exactly what the world needs." Sophia finished stacking a basket of tomatoes, but as the morning continued, more people stopped by the stall. Some bought vegetables, some just wanted to meet the girl from the story. Lily tried to stay focused on counting change, but she noticed something unusual. People were watching. Not just out of curiosity, out of hope. Around noon, Reverend Ellis arrived with his cane and a knowing look. "Well," he said, glancing around the busier than usual stall. "Looks like you started something." Lily looked up. "I didn't start anything." The Reverend chuckled. "Child," he said gently. "Sometimes truth starts things whether we mean it or not." Across the city, Alexander Voss sat alone in his office once more. Ryan entered quietly with a tablet. "Sir," he said, "you should see this." Alexander glanced at the screen. Another article had appeared online. The headline read, "Atlanta market faces demolition, but one young voice is fighting back." Alexander leaned back in his chair slowly. For the first time in years, a redevelopment project had become something unpredictable. Not because of lawyers, not because of money, but because of a small voice that refused to stay quiet. And Alexander Voss was beginning to realize something dangerous. The more people listened to that voice, the harder it would become to ignore it. By Tuesday afternoon, Willow Creek Community Market felt less like a neighborhood market and more like the center of an argument the whole city had suddenly decided to join. People still came for tomatoes, collards, onions, and sweet potatoes. Older men still leaned on folding chairs and offered opinions nobody had requested. Miss Evelyn still arranged her preserves with the precision of a museum curator. Reverend Ellis still bought one thing and stayed to discuss five. Life in its practical details continued. But under all of it, something had changed. More customers came with phones in their hands. More strangers stopped to look at Lily before they looked at the vegetables. More conversations began with, "Are you the little girl from the news?" Lily had already grown tired of that question. "No," she told one woman dryly, handing back 3 quarters and a dime. "I'm the little girl selling okra. The news part was extra." The woman laughed, bought 2 pounds of tomatoes, and left shaking her head in admiration. Sophia kept her face composed through all of it. But the attention sat on her nerves like a weight she could not shift. Public sympathy was a strange kind of comfort. It came with warmth, yes, but also exposure. And exposure was dangerous when powerful people were involved. That afternoon, just after lunch, the market was full enough that the usual sounds had risen again. Vendors calling prices, customers comparing peaches, someone dragging a crate across the concrete, the old radio crackling under a weather report. Sophia was weighing bell peppers when a woman in a linen blouse and dark sunglasses stopped at the edge of the stall. She was one of those people who always looked as though they had stepped out of an air-conditioned car and never fully entered the weather. Her handbag was expensive without shouting about it. Her nails were neat. Her perfume arrived half a second before she did. She smiled at Sophia in a way that was meant to seem friendly. "Well," she said, glancing over the stall, "I suppose this is charming in its own way." Sophia kept bagging the peppers. "What can I get for you?" The woman picked up a tomato, turned it in her fingers, then set it back down as though she had decided not to trust it. "Nothing today," she said. "I was just curious. I saw the story online." Lily, seated on her stool with the change box in her lap, looked up at once. The woman's eyes drifted over Sophia's shirt, her worn jeans, the dirt still caught near the seams of her boots. Then she sighed lightly. "It really is a shame," she said. "A pretty face can carry a lot, but not forever. You'd think women would know by now that if they let themselves go, the world notices." The words were delivered softly, almost lazily, as if cruelty spoken in a pleasant tone somehow counted as advice. Sophia's hand stopped on the edge of the scale. Around them the air changed. Lily looked first at the woman, then at her mother. She saw it immediately, the small shift in Sophia's eyes, the practiced smile that didn't reach them, the quiet tightening at the corners of her mouth. It was the same look from the day Alexander Voss had first stopped at the stall. The same hurt, forced inward before anyone else could see it. Lily slid off her stool. She did not shout this time. That was what made the moment sharper. She walked around the side of the table, stopped beside her mother, and looked directly at the woman in the sunglasses. "My mom did not let herself go," Lily said. The woman blinked. "I beg your pardon." Lily's voice remained calm. "She is working." The woman gave a short, awkward laugh. "Honey, I was only saying." "No," Lily said. The single word cut through the excuse before it could finish forming. "You were being mean." A few customers nearby went still. The woman glanced around, suddenly less comfortable than she had been 10 seconds earlier. "I wasn't being mean," she said, smiling tighter now. "I was trying to help." Lily's expression did not change. People say that right before they say something ugly. Somewhere behind the stall Reverend Ellis made a sound that might have been a cough and might have been the effort of not laughing out loud. The woman straightened. "Well," she said coolly, "children shouldn't interrupt grown folks." Lily folded her arms. "Grown folks shouldn't act ugly in public." There was no laughter now, only silence. Because Lily's voice, small as it was, had gone beyond sass or cleverness. There was something painfully clear in it. Something old in the way children who watched too closely sometimes sounded old. Sophia set down the peppers slowly. "Lily," she said, but Lily kept her eyes on the woman. "You looked at my mom's clothes," she said, "and decided you knew what kind of person she is." The woman opened her mouth. Lily went on. "She gets up before morning. She carries heavy boxes. She comes home tired and still makes dinner. She helps people. She works all day." Lily paused. "That is not letting yourself go. That is taking care of your life." The market had gone quiet again. Miss Evelyn stopped in the middle of wrapping a jar. Mr. Whitaker looked up from his honey labels. Two younger men near the bread table turned completely toward the stall. Lily took one small breath. "My mom isn't less because she looks tired," she said. "She looks tired because she does more than people like you." The woman in sunglasses had lost all trace of ease now. Color touched her cheeks. "I think this child is being extremely disrespectful," she said, glancing toward Sophia as if expecting the mother to step in and restore a social order that no longer favored her. Sophia met her gaze. "No, ma'am," Sophia said, quietly. "She's telling the truth. That did it." The woman gave a short offended laugh, turned and walked away faster than dignity usually allowed. The silence she left behind held for half a heartbeat. Then Reverend Ellis exhaled loudly through his nose. "Well," he said, "if I were her, I'd keep walking until I hit Alabama." A ripple of laughter moved through the market, soft at first and then fuller, not mocking so much as relieved, a pressure valve releasing. Lily looked up at her mother. "Was I too much?" Sophia stared at her for a long moment. Then she reached down and touched Lily's cheek. "No, baby," she said. "You were exactly enough." The words landed harder than Sophia intended. For a second Lily just looked at her. Then, satisfied, she nodded once and went back to her stool. Customers resumed moving. The radio resumed crackling. Somebody asked about sweet potatoes. Somebody else laughed too loudly at Reverend Ellis's Alabama remark. Life closed around the moment and carried it forward. But the moment did not disappear. It moved through the market. It settled into memory. And because the world now insisted on recording everything, it traveled farther than that. A college student near the flower stand had captured most of the exchange on her phone. By 4 o'clock the clip had spread online. Not Lily shouting, Lily speaking. Calm, direct, clear. "My mom isn't less because she looks tired. She looks tired because she does more than people like you." By 5 the video had made its way into inboxes, text threads, social feeds, neighborhood groups, and eventually onto the desk of Ryan Ellis. Alexander Voss was in his office when Ryan entered without his usual small talk. "You need to see this," Ryan said. Alexander looked up from a draft acquisition timeline. "Another article." Ryan handed him the tablet. Alexander watched in silence. He saw the woman at Sophia's stall. Saw Sophia's face close itself politely around insult. Saw Lily step down from her stool. Heard the child defend her mother not with noise this time but with moral precision. He watched the clip once, then again. When it ended the room stayed very quiet. Ryan did not speak. Alexander set the tablet on his desk, but not before the paused image fixed itself in his mind. Lily beside her mother, one small hand on the edge of the stall, looking at the world like she expected it to answer for itself. At last Alexander said, "Who was the woman?" Ryan glanced at the screen. "I can find out." Alexander looked toward the window below him. The city was beginning to light up for evening. She said Sophia had let herself go, he said, more to himself than to Ryan. Ryan waited. Alexander's voice, when it came again, was quieter. "No," he said, "that's not what that looks like." It was the first time he had spoken of Sophia Parker without contempt, and Ryan noticed. By Wednesday morning the story no longer belonged to the market. It belonged to the city. News vans had started appearing 2 blocks away, careful not to crowd the narrow market lot but close enough that cameras could capture the wooden stalls and bright piles of vegetables that had suddenly become the center of Atlanta's newest conversation. People still came to buy food, but now they came with curiosity too. Some wanted to see the place everyone was talking about. Some wanted to meet the girl from the videos. Some simply wanted to show support in the quiet ways people sometimes do, buying an extra bag of tomatoes, lingering longer than usual, offering small smiles that meant more than words. Sophia Parker had already decided she did not like any of it. Attention did not pay rent. Attention did not stop redevelopment contracts. Attention did not protect people when powerful men decided something valuable stood where they wanted to build. She kept working. That was the only answer she trusted. Lily, meanwhile, had noticed something else entirely. People were listening. That part interested her. She sat on her stool with the metal change box open across her knees, counting quarters while a young reporter spoke to Miss Evelyn near the preserve stand. "So you've known Sophia for years?" the reporter asked. Miss Evelyn folded her arms. "Long enough to know that girl earned every ounce of respect that child was talking about." The reporter scribbled something quickly in a notebook. Across the aisle Lily leaned toward her mother. "Mom." "Yes, baby. Why do grown-ups act surprised when someone tells the truth?" Sophia paused while weighing a bundle of collard greens. "Because truth is easier to ignore when nobody says it out loud." Lily nodded slowly, filing the answer away. At the edge of the lot a black sedan pulled quietly to a stop. It was not one of the SUVs from before, and there were no assistants stepping out with folders, only Alexander Voss. He stepped from the car alone. For a moment he stood beside the vehicle watching the market. No one had noticed him yet. From a distance the scene looked ordinary again. Vendors arranging produce, customers chatting, a radio playing something soft and familiar. It was almost easy to forget that the place had become a public argument over land, power, and respect. Almost. Alexander walked into the market without announcing himself. The first person to see him was Reverend Ellis. The old man tilted his head slightly. "Well," he murmured, "look who decided to come back without a parade." Alexander nodded politely as he passed. "Good morning." The Reverend tapped his cane once against the pavement. "Morning." Miss Evelyn noticed. She said nothing, but her eyes followed him carefully. Words spread quickly along the stalls, not through whispers this time but through the simple shift in attention that moved like wind through tall grass. And then Lily saw him. She stopped counting coins. "Oh," she said. Sophia looked up. Alexander Voss had reached the stall again, but this time there was something different about him. He wasn't carrying the air of inspection. He wasn't scanning the property like a blueprint. He looked thoughtful, which to Lily was suspicious. "You came back," she said. Alexander glanced at the change box. "You're still working?" "Yes." Lily closed the lid with a quiet click. "So," she said, "which step are you on now?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Step, thinking was step 1, Lily reminded him. Fixing it was step 2. A small smile flickered at the corner of Reverend Ellis's mouth nearby. Alexander looked at Sophia. "May I speak with you?" Sophia straightened slowly. "You are speaking with me." Alexander nodded. "Yes, but I meant privately." Lily leaned forward immediately. "Why?" Alexander looked down at her. "Because some conversations require fewer witnesses." Lily shook her head. "Important conversations should have more witnesses." Several vendors nearby nodded quietly. Alexander seemed to consider this. Then he looked back at Sophia. "You run this stall 6 days a week?" "Yes." "And the market is essential to your income?" "Yes." Alexander drew a slow breath. "My company plans to submit a formal acquisition request for this block next month." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Conversations stopped. Even the reporter near Miss Evelyn lowered her notebook. Lily's hands tightened on the change box. "So you're still planning to tear it down?" she said. Alexander did not answer immediately. "That depends on several factors." "Like money," Lily said. "Money is one factor and the people here." Alexander looked around the market again. The stalls, the vendors, the customers who had paused to listen. "They are another factor." Lily studied his face carefully. "You're still thinking in rich people sentences," she said. A few quiet laughs escaped nearby. Alexander did not appear offended. Instead he surprised everyone by pulling a folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket. He placed it gently on the edge of the vegetable table. Sophia frowned slightly. "What is that?" "A proposal." "For what?" Alexander met her eyes. "For keeping the market." The silence that followed felt almost unreal. Miss Evelyn leaned forward so far she nearly knocked over a jar. Reverend Ellis blinked slowly. Lily looked from the paper to Alexander and back again. "You're serious?" Alexander nodded. "There may be a way to develop the surrounding properties while preserving this market." Sophia stared at him. "Why?" Alexander did not answer right away. Instead he glanced briefly toward Lily. Then back at Sophia. "Because sometimes," he said quietly, "the numbers on paper are missing part of the equation." Lily leaned closer to the paper but didn't touch it. She looked up at him again. "So you're trying step 2. Alexander allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "I'm trying too." Lily considered this for several seconds, then she nodded once. "Good." She tapped the change box. "Because step 3 is proving you meant it." Alexander looked down at her. "And how would you suggest I do that?" Lily shrugged. "Start by not destroying things people love." The market held its breath again. Alexander Voss looked around the wooden stalls one more time. And for the first time since the argument began, the future of Willow Creek Community Market no longer seemed as certain as it had the week before. The silence after Alexander Voss placed the folded paper on Sophia Parker's table lasted only a few seconds, but it changed the shape of the morning. Markets were not built for silence. They were built for weighing produce, counting cash, greeting neighbors, calling out prices, and discussing weather, church, and blood pressure with equal seriousness. Silence in a place like Willow Creek Community Market meant something had landed hard enough to interrupt life itself. Sophia looked down at the paper but she did not touch it. Lily did. Not enough to unfold it. Just one finger against the edge, like she was testing whether it was real. Miss Evelyn came one careful step closer from her preserve stall. Reverend Ellis leaned in on his cane. Two customers who had no reason to stay suddenly developed a deep interest in bell peppers. The young reporter across the aisle looked as though Christmas had arrived early and carrying legal documents. Sophia kept her eyes on Alexander. "What kind of proposal?" she asked. Alexander glanced once around the stall, aware now of every ear within 20 feet. "The kind that requires a proper conversation," he said. Lily frowned. "That sounds like another rich people sentence." A small laugh escaped Reverend Ellis before he could stop it. Alexander's expression shifted only slightly. "It means I'd rather explain it carefully than badly." Lily considered that. "That is better." Sophia still had not touched the paper. "Why now?" she asked. The question was quiet. That made it sharper. Alexander held her gaze. "Because I've had time to review the site more completely." Miss Evelyn folded her arms. "And because a child embarrassed you on camera." Ryan Ellis, who had just appeared at the edge of the aisle with his tablet in hand, had the sense to remain silent. Alexander did not turn toward Miss Evelyn. "Public attention is part of the situation," he said. "Not all of it." Sophia's face gave away nothing. But Lily knew that look. It was the look her mother wore when she was listening very hard and trusting very little. "Read it, Mom," Lily said softly. Sophia glanced at her daughter. Then at the paper again. Finally she picked it up and unfolded it. It was only a single page. No glossy rendering. No architectural fantasy full of smiling strangers and impossible sunlight. Just a typed outline, clean and spare, a revised development concept, preservation of the central vendor corridor, infrastructure upgrades funded through adjacent commercial build-out, priority lease protections for existing vendors in good standing, a community board with vendor representation. Sophia read it once through. Then again, slower. The market had gone quiet all over again. "It's not a contract," Alexander said. "It's an alternative framework." Sophia looked up. "Meaning it can still disappear." "It means there is now another option." Lily watched her mother's eyes move over the page. She could tell Sophia wanted to believe nothing about this man. It would be safer that way, cleaner, but she could also see something more dangerous creeping in. Hope. Hope was dangerous when you were poor. It made promises feel heavier when they broke. "What's the catch?" Miss Evelyn asked. Alexander answered without irritation. "There isn't one. There's always one," Reverend Ellis said mildly. Ryan stepped forward at last. "The complication," he said in the tone of a man trying to prevent a room from becoming a battlefield, "is that this would require internal approval, revised planning, and cooperation from parties who currently prefer the original model." "That's a very tidy way of saying powerful people want the old plan," Miss Evelyn said. Ryan nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Sophia folded the paper carefully and placed it on the table beside the tomatoes. "You're asking us to trust a possibility." Alexander looked at the document, then at her. "I'm saying the original outcome is no longer the only one under consideration." Lily rested both hands on her change box. "That still sounds slippery." This time even Sophia almost smiled. Before Alexander could answer, a voice cut in from behind him. "Sir." It was Derek Lang. He was walking fast, shoulders tight, a leather folder clamped in one hand. Unlike Ryan, Derek never understood the value of entering a tense situation gently. He came to problems the way men came to fences they intended to kick down. He stopped when he saw the crowd around the stall. His eyes moved from Alexander to Sophia to Lily, then to the folded page on the table. Something hard flashed across his face. "We need a word," he said. Alexander did not move. "You can speak." Derek glanced at the surrounding vendors, clearly disliking the idea of witnesses. "Privately." "No." The word came flat and final. Lily looked up at Sophia as if to say, "See, important conversations should have witnesses." Derek inhaled slowly through his nose. The city inspector's office has finalized preliminary compliance concerns for several vendor units. Sophia's spine stiffened. Ryan looked sharply at Derek. "What concerns?" Derek opened the folder. "Structural hazards, code inconsistencies, unauthorized modifications, sanitation flags." Miss Evelyn made a sound of disgust. "Oh, spare me." Derek ignored her and continued. "If the notices go out this week it will accelerate vacancy." Alexander turned his head very slowly. "Accelerate." Derek seemed to realize too late that he had chosen the wrong word. "I mean clarify the urgency of transition." "No," Alexander said. "You meant accelerate." A current passed through the aisle. Everyone felt it. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You were planning to force people out." Derek straightened. "The property is non-compliant in multiple areas. These vendors are month to month at best. No one is forcing anyone. We are moving within legal channels." "Legal," Reverend Ellis said quietly, "is often the favorite costume of cruelty." Derek looked like a man who considered old pastors one more obstacle between himself and efficiency. Alexander held out his hand. "Folder." Derek hesitated, then gave it to him. Alexander opened it. His eyes moved across the pages quickly, but Lily noticed the change in his face almost at once. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. The unpleasant kind. "These notices were drafted yesterday." He said. "Yes, sir." "And you intended to circulate them without discussing the revised framework." Derek shifted his weight. "Because with respect, sir, the revised framework is not practical." Ryan spoke for the first time since Derek arrived. "Practical for whom?" Derek ignored him and kept his attention on Alexander. "We're losing momentum already. Media attention has complicated the timeline. If we let community sentiment dictate the process, we'll never close this acquisition cleanly." There it was. Not just the plan but the philosophy beneath it. Cleanly, as if removing hundreds of ordinary lives from a place they depended on.